Give them the proof. Something's good.
All right, is everybody ready? Where'd Mary go?
I'm coming. She's coming.
Okay.
We got Brendan tonight.
We're gonna call our meeting to order. Jeremy, you want to take roll?
This is Brenda speaking. and
Brenda, we want to take roll? I'm
gonna
sorry.
take roll. That's okay. It was Andrea's birthday, so she took the night off.
Happy birthday, Andrea.
Yeah. Keith Blumendahl,
Present.
Deb LeCompte,
Present.
Mike Hoffer, Jerry Kennedy,
Present.
Wayne Rouse,
Present.
Mary Grady,
Present.
Nan Toppin.
Present.
Sorry. Thank you, Brenda.
You're welcome, Chairman.
Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes? Do we have any comments, corrections?
I couldn't find any
Otherwise-
corrections and I read it.
Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Staff report on recent council meetings.
Chairman, Commissioners, we did have a council meeting this past Tuesday night and had several amendments on there for council to consider. One was food trucks, and they did make a slight change to that. They liked that P&Z wanted to open up the hours, unlike a lot of other communities have limited hours, but they wanted to open up even more. So what P&Z had talked about was, hey, if the restaurant or eating and drinking establishment is open, then the food truck can operate. And they asked to open it up that, say, the food truck can operate basically at any time. So my only concern was I'm not sure if the health department would allow that, so there was a stipulation in there as approved by the health department was added in. Outside of that, it was approved as you recommended it. We also had a presentation by Mr. Murphy on high grass, and that was also approved as presented. Very limited questions. You did a great job with the presentation.
Good job, Miles.
Yeah, he got almost a standing ovation, the closest to a standing ovation I've seen in a long time. And it was a fine presentation, just like he gave us, my friend.
Yep.
We also talked about obstructions on the oceanfront, mainly sidewalk cafes allowed on the boardwalk. That's something that council wanted to hear. They talked about it at the non-agenda items at our March meeting. So we brought that back to them, and it was outside of zoning, so we brought it straight to them, and that was basically we have an allowance for 4.5 feet or a quarter of the boardwalk is the area that you're allowed to go out from the facade of the building. So on the oceanfront boardwalk where you don't have buildings on the oceanfront side and it's not as constrained, they wanted to give a little bit more allowance. And honestly, we've had some trouble reeling people back in on there. So hopefully that's going to help them stay in compliance and give them a little more room out there for their sidewalk cafes.
So we did decide to give them more room on the oceanfront side?
It went to 6 feet, so 4.5 to 6
So
feet
they
on
can fit a
the.
four top out there, basically?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
And let's see, we also updated our beaches and waterfront ordinance, and that was just basically to clarify what is a public beach and to talk about it talks about what obstructions are or aren't allowed on the public beach. And that was just to clean up some language, is something also that our council had asked us to clean up. So that was it.
There was another council meeting.
Oh, we did have, I missed the pedal vehicle. We also had the pedal vehicle, the commercial pedal vehicles that was presented to council, and the application was, staff was struggling with the application, and council had the same struggles with that application. So council asked to table that, if they would consider tabling their item until they can get their application clarified. So we're going to go back and meet with that applicant again and try to resolve their issues and bring them back.
Ed, I couldn't bring it up on my computer last night.
I talked to Kim about that. It was, we've been having problems when we switched services from one contractor to another that helps display our meetings. And Kim was working with them. They had it displayed, but my understanding it was on another YouTube channel. So it was another link where it was displayed, and she was on the phone with them the next morning because they were seeing it, but we couldn't find it. She found it after the meeting. So this couple months in a row, we've had problems with that. I'm hoping we got it resolved. I'm sorry about that. But it should be, if it's not updated now, it should be very soon.
Yeah, and I found it.
Yeah, my mother managed to find it as well, so.
Yeah, I found it, but it took some time. It missed
Well, where
quite a
did
bit
you
of the
find
meeting.
it, though?
Somebody actually found the link and posted it
Oh,
up.
really?
Yeah.
I didn't.
I just
Yeah.
flew into town. I wasn't allowed to watch it, so
So,
I didn't get to see.
but yeah, it was not the link that's on the town page.
They
So-
had moved it
That's
because
what
they
I
were doing
thought.
some testing, and the company forgot to move it back to where it's supposed to be. So.
Okay.
And I have one more question. Is the town made any decisions on the short-term rentals in R3 and R2?
We have not had additional discussions. I'm guessing that will be coming up at some future meetings, workshops.
Will that be a planning and zoning issue?
Hope not.
We actually met today.
You're leaving.
I got one right here.
We actually started reviewing a request for proposals for a land use plan, and I'm sure that's going to be something
that will
that is
address it.
discussed in the land use plan. And you, being on planning and zoning, you will be probably, we'll probably have like a land use plan ad hoc committee, but the planning board will also be and it'll probably be some of you on that committee. And then the planning board will also be very involved in that process, or we're hoping to get you very involved, so.
There were actually 2 council meetings since our last meeting. Accessory structures.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. So accessory structures, we
which they took no action.
took no action on, they decided to take no action on that. I think that was the only planning item, that one.
I have a ton of stuff I want to say about it, but I'm not going to say that much. But I do want to clarify the fact that me as a builder on this board did not have anything to gain from changing those accessory structures. And Jeremy probably knows best the experience that I went through with a lot that I had that I was going to build my own house. But that lot I've since built a spec house and sold it. And that accessory structures in no way would have affected me. And that was brought up during a council meeting. So I just want to clarify that for my own integrity that I felt came into question. Anything else for council meetings?
Not unless you have anything for me.
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Jeremy, report on, is it Jeremy still recent developments? Yeah. I don't want to call out the wrong person.
Just briefly, permitting that since the last, about 3 weeks ago, last we met, we've 13 permits for renovation, repair, and additions, 8 new construction, 2 demo permits, or still seeing demos, and 2 final certificate of occupancies. And with code enforcement, we've received 9 complaints and we've wrote 10 letters of violation. Some commercial activity, one thing the Putt-Putt property, they weren't going to run this summer, and they didn't run last summer, so the property was really looking pretty bad. So we've notified the property owner, and you've probably noticed that they've demoed the buildings, demoed the batting cages, graded the lot down, and mowed. So I don't know what, or haven't heard, or they haven't let us know what they may do with the lot, if they're going to sell it or try to develop it. But we just were wanting them to clean it up at least while they're figuring out things. The other one is across the street, beside the veterinarian, is Positively Perfect Pet Store, and also on the boardwalk is a Doe to Go
What is
is
that?
opening up. It's,
Bread store?
yeah.
Oh,
Nice.
great.
And also just coming soon, we have a conditional use permit that you'll have next month for the gelato place that's on the boardwalk. Would like to offer wine with their gelatos. So because they're not classified or they don't serve food, under our ordinance, they would be a bar. So they would be coming in for a conditional use permit. Also have a conditional use permit modification for Harbor View, located at 402 North Lake Park Boulevard. This was previously Pelican Point, which is a 36-unit condo building beside Domino's. That was approved a couple years ago. So now they're modifying some aspects of their building and their site, so that because they were deemed major, they're having to come back through the process. We're also working on a bulkhead ordinance, mainly for Canal Drive, or just creating specs for anyone who's wanting to install a bulkhead. Also, council directed us to come up with some minimum standards for commercial buildings that are maybe dilapidated, to give us more teeth to clean up commercial buildings. And also, we'll be updating a new flood ordinance.
Would that come under code enforcement, the standards for the commercial buildings?
It does for the for enforcement. Yeah.
Can
So-
you expand on the flood ordinance?
Yes. So part of FEMA has given us official date when we could adopt the new flood maps.
August 28th?
Yes, and a part of that process is adopting the new, they give you a flood model and there's some changes and flexibility you have with the flood model, but you have to adopt that up with the flood map, with the new flood map, so. We'll be getting more in detail into that, and maybe what higher standards, if any, do we want to see in the town.
Thank you.
And that is all I had.
Thank you, Jeremy. All right. Nobody signed up to speak, I take it?
I don't know, we got some people.
We are going to roll right into our first item. It's a conditional use permit for a body piercing establishment to be located at 1009 North Lake Park Boulevard, Unit B2, and the Highway Business District.
No one signed up.
No one signed up for public speaking.
No, I just announced our next,
Oh,
thank you. I didn't know you went to check.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Brenda.
you're welcome, Chairman.
Checking on the application. Chairman, Commissioners, this is an application for a body piercing establishment going into the existing Pleasure Island Plaza at 1009 North Lake Park Boulevard, Unit B2. And a couple months ago, you amended the ordinance to allow for the use with specific standards. You have to be 200 feet from a residential district, also from a church or a school, and also a playground or a library, parks, and also 400 feet from another body piercing studio, which we don't have any currently, so this would be the first one. And it's a new use, but it is going to, like I said, into the existing building, and that for the tattoo studio. And the structure already has, or the shopping center has 14 units. It was built in 1984. It has an existing 5-foot sidewalk that the DOT put in several years ago. The parking spaces, because it is going within existing heated space, it would not trigger any more parking for the shopping center. There's also currently a dumpster that will remain on site for them to use. There's no upgrades in the water and sewer of the existing unit. Because this existing shopping center, there's no buffer requirements that would kick in. Any new signage would have to meet our sign regulations, and they're not expanding the unit or the footprint of the structure. It does meet the distance requirements. It's 250 feet from the residential district. And the applicant is here if you have any questions. And I can answer as well.
Jeremy, would you just restate for me what actually we did with this the last time? You said it, but I didn't catch all of it.
What we did was we approved the text amendment.
Okay.
Yes.
To allow
With a CUP.
with the CUP. Okay.
Now he's applying for the CUP.
Okay, that answers the question.
I know, I was confused when I saw it too.
Okay, I'm with you.
Anybody for Jeremy, any questions? No?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. At this time, we open the public hearing, correct?
Yes.
Make a motion, we open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Would the applicant like to step up and say anything further than what Jeremy said?
And Mr. Chairman, I apologize, but
Sorry.
you also would need to be sworn in.
Oh, anybody that wants to speak on or against this needs to be sworn in with, okay. If you don't have anything, you don't need to.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else that plans on speaking for or against this? Just for this item, okay. So nobody needs to speak. I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
A second.
Aye. Discussion? Commissioners?
Jeremy, staff has recommended that we approve this CUP, is that correct?
Correct. It is consistent with the land use plan and the policies.
From what I've read, they've met all the specific and the general standards.
I agree.
That's what I see.
Anybody want to make a motion? Or is there any further discussion? I'm sorry.
I'd make a motion if I knew what to say.
I would too. If I could find it, I would do it.
Yeah, I'm looking.
You guys afraid to make a motion? Come on now.
Well, I'm trying to find it.
Trying to find the language.
Where is the language, Jeremy?
It should be in the packet, but I will pull it up. Apologize, I had it within the PowerPoint.
So there's an extra line you added to our language that we have to add in, correct?
Not for the CUP.
Okay.
I'll give it a shot.
Go ahead. He's bringing up the language on your screen there so you can make sure you get everything in there you're supposed
Oh,
to.
yes, okay. Is there a number on it? I'm sorry,
Well, you're not changing the ordinance, so you
Yeah, it's
shouldn't
not a
have to
number.
reference a
Change
number.
anything.
I think you can just restate what's on the agenda item right here.
Okay.
I think
Yeah,
so too.
yeah.
There's the recommended statement.
I make a motion that the conditional use permit for a body piercing establishment to be located at 10009 Lake Park Boulevard, Unit B2, in the Highway Business District, be approved.
Is that
It
good?
meets, it meets the 7 specific standards and 4 general
Yeah.
conditions.
And it's in general conformity with the land use
And
plan.
it's in general conformity with the land use plan.
Second.
No discussion? So we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, next up, we're moving right through. Amend Chapter 40, Article, whatever Roman numeral that is, Section 40-5, Set 47, to exempt appurtenances
I think it's 18.
of 10 feet or less from the building height limit. Applicant is Pelican Point CB LLC.
Chairman, Commissioners, before Jeremy starts with his presentation, this is a text amendment, but there is, as Jeremy pointed out in his first presentation about things going on in Carolina Beach, there is a pending conditional use permit, which will be quasi-judicial, that will be, the same applicant will be taking advantage of this potential allowance. So that item could not be discussed tonight because it is part of that quasi-judicial hearing. I know you
Well,
know
we're going
that,
to be
but
discussing it as a whole town.
as a whole town
Correct.
and not for that specific project.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that, clarifying that.
Correct. So this is a town-wide ordinance change to exempt what is, how building height is pretty much is measured. And I'll get to what the current regulation and what the definition of building height is. And it's the distance measured from the highest opportunist.
Appurtenance.
Appurtenance. Thank you there.
Pertinence.
And from the street line, which is defined as the front property line and the right-of-way. And it goes to the tip top of the structure. And so, and in 2008, we actually amended this regulation to exempt hotels from the, to be exempted 10 feet or less for things such as parapet walls, HVACs, their elevator equipments, similar, and most of the time it has because they have to have a penthouse for the elevator equipment on top of the building. So that was one of the defining elements of the building to be exempted from the total height measurement.
Was there a reason why it was only hotels that were exempt?
Mainly because at that time it was a hotel who was looking for the exemption, so they just made it a specific use to be exempt from the.
Was there a reason that you didn't just increase the height limit instead of giving a false sort of sense of how tall a structure was?
No, just because it would still be to the roof, would be measured to essentially what the building, and it wouldn't give you any additional heated space. So it would just allow for things that the building need to function for its elements could be located on top of the roof.
Not considering the appearance or total heights of a building, danger, anything like that, just because it sort of gives a false sense of how high a structure is. I just wondered why you would have to, you couldn't have included that. You know, you didn't say that 60 foot was all heated. It was 50 foot heated and 10 foot wasn't. But if it just said 60 foot building, then you knew when you looked at the plan of the town, then you knew actually what heights those buildings was. Just didn't know. Was the reason.
Yeah. And so here is the proposed regulation to limit, of course, hotels. So then it would be any structure could take advantage of the allowance for the height to be exempted for. So for the opportunities.
So you're opening it up to not just, or they're asking to open it up to anything, a house,
Yes, so
any structure.
appurtenance, yes. And so
Appurtenance.
the building height, existing now, it's 40 feet is the lowest that we have, and that's in the kind of the R3 area past from 4th Street to Dow Road. Then around from 3rd to Carolina Sands to R2 is 45 feet. And then all the other districts are 50 feet. Now, in the red here, with the highway business, the T1, the marina business, and the CBD can all actually go over 50 feet with a conditional use permit. With the exception of the CBD, they're all capped out at 60 feet. But if you do go over 50 feet, then you have to, it's called a 1-for-1. So for your setbacks, every foot that you go over 50 feet, you have to give up a foot of setback, additional setback from the requirement.
Is that on each side? Is that on all four sides of the setback, or just one side? So you're giving a foot, you're giving a foot, you're getting a foot, or is it you're giving a foot and you're losing 4 feet?
It would be on all sides.
So you're really losing
That's
4
your-
feet.
So it'd be a foot for,
Okay.
and like I said, the CBD, it has this for non-residential, it's actually 115 feet in the land use plan. And for residential, it's 50 feet, but the same, it's capped out at 60, so with the 1-to-1. So most time you're going to see, currently hotels are going to be the ones that are exceeding the 60-foot height. Here's just kind of a snapshot of hotels and multifamily buildings that we have, and you can kind of see the building heights, and then there's a little tower sticking out, and those are for the equipment or stairways. And where these Pelican Watch, Harbor Oaks, and Atlantic Towers, those are the multifamily structures, where they're located could not be built to that same height today. And Golden Sands also is a hotel, but it exceeds what the height limit is from where it's located. And the Marriott and the Hampton Inn, of course, are in our central business district and have had conditional use permits to go to the allowable height that they were built to. Just as an example, if it's if a 50-foot building, and then they wanted to exceed for the exhaust system, or if it's a chimney, they could go additional 10 feet.
Would that include like an equipment room or things to that nature? Would that be considered an appurtenance?
It could be if it's holding the equipment to function for the building.
Correct, okay.
Don't quite understand the flagpoles for the maintenance of the building.
So-
Not that I have anything against it.
The ordinance change, it would accomplish the following. It would maintain the heated space or occupancy area to a maximum of the building height that's required, so you wouldn't be expanding the heated square footage of a building. It does allow a little bit more flexibility in design, as far as offering skylights. There's solar panels on top of the roof, ventilation equipment, lightning rod, housing for the elevator equipment, as I mentioned, or maybe if it's related to a house, it may be a chimney that exceeds over the height limit. And it does restrict the 10 feet of the appurtenance for the requirement. The land use plan, it is currently inconsistent with the land use plan. The land use plan is very specific, and it coordinates right with the ordinance, as these both were changed back in 2008. So it would need to be changed as well to read exactly how, if Planning and Zoning recommends approval, it would also amend the land use plan. And recently, the General Assembly adopted language that if Planning and Zoning or Town Council saw where it was inconsistent with the a master plan, or in our case, our land use plan, then it would automatically approve or amend the land use plan.
We wouldn't have to have a separate hearing to do that, is what you're saying?
But in our case, because we're governed by CAMA land use plan, and there's some different statutory requirements as far as advertising and the public hearing process to amend it, we do have to have essentially a hearing on that to change our land use plan, to open it up for the public.
How do we change the ordinance without changing the land use plan first?
So, because it is a little bit different, because we're a coastal community and we're governed by the CAMA land use plan, if you foresaw that it would be approved by the ordinance, then it would simultaneously be approved with the land use plan. But they were wanting to have that the public was available to open up for a hearing. Or you could deny it based off being inconsistent with the existing land use plan policies. That is also your option. And I'll answer any questions that you may have.
I have a comment, I guess, not so much a question, because you and I already had this discussion, but the North Carolina Building Code doesn't count appurtenances as building height. So my question naturally would be, why does the town of Carolina Beach account an appurtenance as building height? At the same time, the land use plan is the land use plan, and making adjustments to it isn't something we should think softly of. But
Yeah.
the definition in the building code, and I always question this when it comes to our ordinances versus what the North Carolina State Building Code says, why are we addressing it differently on a building, on what the building code says? Just makes me question why we do that, I guess, as a town. And I'm just making a statement, I'm not trying to get you to answer it.
Okay.
Because I know it's probably impossible.
It is. I mean, zoning is going to be a little bit different. Actually, there is just like there's a building code that comes out that the state adopts, there's also the code council adopts a model zoning ordinance, and we try to, we purchase those books and try to mimic those to be as close as possible to what the state is trying to do with the building code. But zoning is and can be what your community wants it to be. It doesn't have to mimic that.
Building
So
code.
it's never going to match the but we will try to make it as close as possible.
I had a chance to ask Jeremy this, and I'd like to ask you the same question, Ed, and Miles can chime in as well, that you guys are not making a recommendation on that, and that's really putting the burden on us, and that's kind of tough.
As far as this application for going above the appurtenances,
Yes.
is staff would recommend approval of this. I mean, we don't see this
I
as.
guess I didn't read it that way in my packet.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think we put a solid recommendation in there, but we have,
It said you
You're
don't
not
have a
making
recommendation.
okay.
It literally says that.
Because you think it should be based on what the public wants.
That the staff shouldn't be recommending what our building heights.
And Jeremy and I did talk about this, and we're going back and forth. My thought was, it's appurtenances for a hotel, but it really should be appurtenances. I mean, it shouldn't be applicable to one use. It should be for any use. Was my thought, and I think we had that conversation after the packet went out. But yeah, I would recommend approval.
Say that again, please, about,
The hotel, right now, it's specific to
Right.
one land use. And I don't think the ordinance should be specified for one land use. It should treat all of them equally. So if there's an allowance for appurtenances, it shouldn't be just for a hotel.
Got
It
it.
should be for any type of,
Or at least it should be narrowed down to residential or non-residential,
it could be that way, yes.
not
but-
just hotels.
But not just a hotel. I mean, I don't know why So based on that, and we talked about it, I think it was after the packet went out, but we would recommend approval.
Thank you.
I have a question. Could we make it specific to a zoning area and, like in the CBD or?
Well, there's definitely heights that are allowed in specific zoning districts. This one is for, to me, it's not necessarily a height, but it's, just what can go above that. You're not increasing the building height, you're just making some allowances for what's on top of the building. Could you make that specific for a zoning district? Absolutely.
Would that be, sorry for taking
That's
over
okay.
your
That's
question. Would that have to be specific in the land use change following
You would have to clarify that,
that
yes.
it was for a specific zone?
The land use plan could be broad, your zoning could be specific. So you could
Okay.
do it that way. Obviously, the applicant has a specific zoning district they're interested in.
Okay, well, I guess whatever else I have to say would be more in our discussion than it would be for you guys. Thank you.
Jeremy, I think I'm not quite clear on something Keith asked about. Most of the decisions we make, one of the key criteria we look at is this consistent with the land use plan? And going out of the gate, we know it's not. So you're suggesting that we could vote in favor of this, and then is it just making the assumption that the land use plan is going to get changed?
No, we make that decision tonight, too.
So tonight, we would be that's what I wasn't clear on. We are actually going to vote to change the land use plan.
Yes, it would be the next item on a separate motion.
If we approve this, we would do
Would
that,
be
yes.
to-
I see.
Anyone else for Jeremy?
Just one more clarification. So when the decision for hotels was made previously, did that also require a change to the land use plan?
It did, yes.
Was it done in the same fashion, where it was done in the same meeting?
There was different requirements to change the land use plan, and it wasn't done automatically with the text amendment. So it was several public meetings to change the land use plan.
If I'm not mistaken, it was, because we talked about it, Dave, we went through years of amending our land use, or updating our land use plan. Wasn't it just during that process? Or did we do a separate amendment?
It was a separate amendment.
It was.
But it was several public hearings.
Because the land use plan was done in 2007, correct?
It was finished in 2007, but we actually started the process in '03.
Wow. And we're getting ready to start one now?
And
I might not live to see.
That's what we said. We've talked to some consultants about it. That's what we do not want to repeat.
No. You
and
go
that's,
through multiple councils and planning boards and. yeah.
Oh, we had several committees.
Oh, man.
Some of y'all were probably involved with it.
All right,
Just-
just go ahead, back to
Just
the topic.
one quick clarification for me. If we were to have a vote, and hypothetically, this is approved, then on the heels of that, we'll have another agenda item for the land use plan to be amended so that this falls in line
To
with
exempt
that.
appurtenances.
Yeah. Can we have that second, the motion that would come subsequent to a favorable vote on this, can we have that without notice of a public hearing?
you would need to open up that item for a public hearing.
There's
Both
already
items are
been
public
notification.
hearings.
Oh, okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does, but I think it'll come up later. That's why I wanted to get it on the record.
When was the notification? You said there'd already been notification?
There's already a notification for the meeting, right?
Correct,
That
yes.
doesn't say what the public saw doesn't say it doesn't meet the land use plan.
But we advertised for the land use plan amendment specifically.
Oh, you did?
Yes, on what the change was going to be or
Okay.
proposed.
I thought so. I just wanted, just put it on the record because there'll be a question. You just answered it for everyone.
Yeah.
Questions later.
Anyone else for Jeremy? Clarifications, questions? We reserve the right to bring you back, obviously. Thank you, Jeremy. So at this time, we open up a public hearing. Make a motion, we open up a public hearing, I'm sorry.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Would the, is this a quasi judicial? Do we have to swear in or any of that?
It is not, no.
Okay. Would the applicant like to come up and state your name and address for the record and plead your case?
Good evening. My name is Michael White. My address is 6 Sandpiper Street, Rice Beach, North Carolina. I'm here as a representative of the Harbor View development, which you saw earlier will be coming up on your agenda for CUP. We've been in the process. I've been working with the owner. I'm not the developer of this project. He couldn't be here tonight because he's involved in a fundraising deal in Raleigh. So I kind of got asked to be here at the last minute, kind of thrown under the bus a little bit. But in general, in the process, I've been working with this group to redesign this project, update the building. In that process, we, in the redesign of the building itself, we've had to deal with typical constraints that you would face building on an island, building on the waterfront, dealing with CAMA issues, flood elevations, building techniques, requirements for elevators, elevator shafts, additional equipment for ventilation, HVAC. And as Commissioner Blumenthal pointed out earlier, there's not real specificity in the way building heights are determined here, other than it's the lowest point and the highest point. And so that would include anything that sits on top of your building that's a part of the building, which includes the elevator safety stops, which is a requirement. Maybe at the time when this ordinance was drafted, that some of these requirements weren't part of the building technique. There are other things that drive building heights too. You think about floor heights in a building. Typically, at the time maybe this ordinance was drafted, the typical floor height in a building was 8 feet. And over time, people's desire change, the market changes, demands change. What we've seen over the last 10, 20 years is, the market has dictated that, people want less square footage, higher finishes, better design, and to accommodate, the less square footage to create volume, typical ceiling heights have changed to 9 feet. When you look at the constraints of building on an island where, you're restricted by flood elevation, so your building can't sit on the ground, they're elevated. So to make use of that elevated building, you're going to provide parking underneath the building if you can, which we've done in this instance, and most people would in designing a condo building like this. So you're really constrained about being able to lower your building to meet these building height requirements. If you're going to accommodate, typical building height, and what's traditional that we've seen over time as demands change, as design trends change, as safety requirements change in buildings, the techniques that you use to build these buildings, ordinances have changed too. The state ordinance certainly defines building height differently than the town of Carolina Beach. If you look at neighboring Wilmington, for example, their CBD, the building height is established at the bottom of the eave, and so it doesn't include appurtenances like elevator shafts, ventilation equipment, HVAC equipment, or parapet walls around that to shield it so you're not looking at this equipment. And for example, there are more current zoning ordinances that have been passed recently have eliminated building heights altogether and determined that, in, for example, the urban mixed-use zoning is limited to the number of floors. And so it doesn't establish the actual building height. It establishes the number of floors in a building that are allowed in the zoning area. And so, really what we're looking at is creating more specificity to allow for some of these things that have changed over time. which is what you probably spend most of your time doing, is amending ordinances, you know, to accommodate changes as we progress. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I'm good.
Good.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak on this? Yep. If you wouldn't mind stating your name and address for the record.
My name is Mary Weber. My address is 500 St. Joseph Street, Carolina Beach.
Okay.
Thank you to the commissioners for giving me the opportunity. I'm nervous and new at this. I've never done anything like this before. This isn't fleshed out enough for me to know what all my issues might be, but just listening to the little bit of discussion we've had here, a couple of things just come jumping out at me, and one of them is the town has a land use plan, and you all talked about the amount of time and effort and committee meetings and participation that went into it. So I have to figure that's pretty important to the town and everybody who lives and works in it. But it sounds like now you can make a determination about one aspect, like appurtenances on a building, and then with not much ado thereafter, change the land use plan, which, I mean, a lot more people were involved in that plan that are in this, than are in this room now, and that seems short-sighted to me and somewhat scary to think that, boom, you can change it based on one issue. So that's one plan I have with the whole deal here, which may not be, you know, all your issue. And the second thing is Mr. Wade. I think what Mr. Wade had to say about how things change in building and what people desire and where and how they live and the kind of space they want, all made a lot of sense to me. And so then, you know, some of your regulations or ordinances should change in relation to some of those things. But what I heard from him seemed to be all about the building aspect of it or the business aspect of it. And I would like to posit that some of the things that are in place now through the land use plan and other things came about because people here care about a lot of things, and certainly economics and business is one of it. But people care about density, people care about traffic, people care about the human scale of this beautiful island that we live on. People care about sunlight, being able to come in some of their windows and not be smothered, you know, with concrete all around them or some big tall buildings. So I think it behooves all of us to, I mean, this is one little thing and sounds like not such a big deal, but I think that there could be consequences, and I don't think it should be handled like a, you know, an administrative decision, like do you take lunch at 12:15 or at 12:30? I mean, so that's what I want to say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to say it.
Thank you.
You did a nice job.
Yes, you did. I assure you, though, that we do not take these things lightly up here either, and we appreciate your input. Thank you. Anyone else? Come on up, sir.
I'm Rocky Ruffin. I live 500 St. Joseph Street too, the same apartment complex. Of course, we're out of it right now because of the fire. But one of the concerns I have about it, it's not so much of the building and all that. That's fine. I mean, I can understand we got to have growth and all that. But where does it go from there? Can people add on to stuff as it goes? I noticed one property was originally started out to be, I believe, 36, 38 unit, one bedroom units. Now it's expanded, going to be some two bedroom units.
And we really don't need
We
to
can't
talk about a
that
specific project.
But in these deals, basically, whenever you rewrite this thing again, or if you do, you know, I'd say be aware of what could come out of it. Like I said, between parking spots is a big thing. You know, how many parking spaces you got to have for a place. So that's what we're looking at now. Is that the parking problems is bad enough here. We don't want to turn into a Rifle Beach, you know, where everything's so congested you can't park anywhere. And getting bad enough as it is, and plus the traffic problem, we've already found that out to be a problem, and we're working on it. But, I guess my biggest is just be careful with your wording and all, that they can't get around things with this. That's what scares me the most, when you start changing amendments and all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do I have to close a public hearing now, or we
Yes, no one else is.
make a motion, we close the public hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, I got a couple things I want to say.
I do too.
I'm sure. I am not a huge fan of this, and I haven't been from the time I sat down and read it. And, but I didn't see the part about hotels being already exempt from it. I didn't realize that that had happened in 2008. My biggest fear, I think, is, first of all, like Commissioner Toppin said, we're changing the land use plan. And that's not something you should rest easy on making a change to, I don't think, anyway. I don't feel like. But the other side of me says, the building code says this is how you address a building height. And granted, Mr. Parvin clarified that for me, that we're allowed to make it however we want it to say. It doesn't have to follow the building code. Probably the only way I would be able to vote to pass this was if it protected residential areas where we build houses and they're not allowed to have the same exemption for appurtenances to somehow escape the 50-foot or the 45-foot rule on their homes.
That was the reason I raised the question as to can it be specific to
And which I wrote
zones?
down, and I like that question. So that would probably be the only way, right now, before our discussion, that I would possibly be in favor of it. But I'd love to hear from everybody else.
I don't have a problem with it going on commercial, but I'm with y'all in the residential area because people can become very creative when we start
That's my concern
adding
is abuses.
10 feet, So, and I see what they're saying. I did hear you.
It sounds to me like, what I think is problematic is that it's specific to a hotel. I don't think that I'm sure we did.
I agree with that,
I
yeah.
think we probably made the best decision we could at the time. It sounds like now we need to clean that up. But I would just say, let's put it, we're getting ready to do a new land use plan. Let's just table it and make sure it goes into that effort. I'm not in favor of changing the land use plan tonight because of all the reasons Ms. Weber talked about. There's a lot of considerations. Do we even want to measure building height in the new land use plan? Do we want to measure number of floors? Is that an option? I mean, I think there's a lot of things to explore, residential, non-residential, just hotels or all commercial properties. I mean, there's a lot of options. And I think they all need to be thought through, and I would like for the town to make an actual recommendation based on a set of options that, like we normally do. This feels a little rushed to me.
Ms. Kennedy?
Building heights in resort areas is totally different, Keith or Mr. Chairman, from building
Yes.
heights in the state of
Sure
North
is.
Carolina. We have seen in the past resort areas with buildings, gigantic buildings on the front, and all the views diminished. So we have a building height for a reason. We have a land use plan for a reason. The land use plan is the guide. Committees like ours do not dictate to the land use plan. We use the land use plan as a guide. So I cannot support this and will not. I will support working through a new land use plan and that the public be involved with building heights associated not with how much space an owner has in that building, but how much that building either gives a positive attribute to our community or a negative attribute. So I can't support it.
I don't disagree with Commissioner Toppin or Ms. Kennedy, but I do go back to what Ms. Toppin said. I do think we need to clean this thing up at some point. Tonight's probably not tonight, where hotels have an exemption from any other type of building, because that seems a lot of things change, as several people have mentioned, but fairness really doesn't change, and that seems a little lopsided.
When this occurred, was this project already under construction and the exemption was given after the fact, or was it before the fact?
For the hotels?
Yeah,
Do you remember, Jeremy?
It was in the approval, it's already been approved, and it was in a design phase.
it was something that had to go back and have an exemption because
And
of the
then,
perk
yes,
construction.
and so then when, specifically to that project,
Mm-hmm.
when it came for permitting, it was like, well, you know, after it went from design to the site plan approval is,
Right, so it is, the exemption was given after the designing, really construction was started.
Was the project ever actually built?
but no, it was not.
That's what I thought. So we've never actually had to use this exemption.
Correct. And it was the, it was at that time, the Hilton, which was never built, and since then, the Hampton, which is two different ownership, different project.
Correct.
So that's just an example of what can happen. You know, it's something you do one night for one project can turn into years later, commissions, looking at something from a different point of view.
That was-
In my recollection, it was done as an after the fact.
That was my point also, Commissioner Kennedy.
Anybody satisfied with your discussion? Anybody willing to put a motion on the table? Where's the language? I'm going to make a motion that we do not amend Chapter 40, Article XV 111, Section 40-547 to exempt appurtenances of 10 feet or less from the building height limit because it is not consistent with the land use plan.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you guys for coming out.
And Commissioner, it may seem a little redundant, but because
Do I need to say something else?
well, town council will consider this, and they may have a different decision.
Of course.
I'd like to just go through the motions.
Want to go through the motion of
For
the
the
land
land
use
use plan, just to open
Okay.
it up for a
Okay.
public hearing and make a motion.
Next agenda item is adopt a resolution to amend the land use plan policy number 30 to exempt appurtenances. I'm getting good at saying that word. Proud of myself.
We'll have a spelling contest later.
And when you get into the land use plan policies, that's really where it gets into the specific areas, where the 1-for-1 and the 50 and the 115 feet establishments for the building heights are.
If we were going to change the land use plan, I would take that exemption out.
I think it's null and void now.
Well, I agree with you that we have a land use plan coming and we can address all of that at that time. Hopefully, we'll all still be.
That's what our resolution should be.
Yes.
Considered.
Do we need to hear a presentation or can we just go ahead and make a motion?
Yeah, that was pretty, it's the exact same amendment
Yep.
as it was for the zoning ordinance. So unless you have any questions to the land use plan policies, we have a couple of policies that are listed within our land use plan specific to height.
Okay.
Like,
Do we need to make a motion as a board to not adopt that resolution?
yes, if you would open just a public hearing.
Make a motion, we open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Would anyone like to speak on the land use plan? Make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any discussion? Give everybody a fair opportunity here. Make a motion that we do not adopt a resolution to amend the land use policy, plan policy number 30 to exempt appurtenances. Do I have to give a reason?
No, yes, it's just.
We don't feel like it's appropriate to
it's-
change the land use plan in this setting.
And we'll be going through a, land use plan
Yeah, we have a
update.
land use plan coming up, and that can be addressed then.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, next item, discussion items. We have some discussion items?
What's the difference between discussion and non-agenda?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't remember discussion
Okay.
items being on there
Okay.
before.
I have.
Thank you guys for coming out, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have something I'd like to address.
Okay.
At the last council meeting on YouTube, the council asked if any member of the P and Z was in attendance because they had a question about something we did. And as you sat there and listened to the council, it was very apparent that the determination of what they thought we were thinking and what we were thinking was 100% varied.
Can you expand on what the discussion was?
Well.
What was the item, I
well,
mean?
Right this minute, I'm having a senior moment.
It's okay.
No, but if you go back and review,
Okay.
it says they asked, and it was something that we denied, I think, and that we were just afraid to step out and make that statement.
Was it the, I don't know if this is it, but was it the brick and mortar for the
Yeah,
food
yes,
truck?
It was the
yes,
food trucks.
yes.
Right.
But what hit me, and the reason I'm having the senior moment is because I thought the word that because they were afraid, and I thought, I don't know of anybody that was afraid that night, and so I attended. So it would have been really nice if someone had been there to sort of step up and say no, and you're exactly right. It was, why did we want the brick and mortar? Why were we supporting a brick and mortar with a food truck? And we had a really long
We did.
discussion on that. And so I didn't get the proper acknowledgement of what process we went through. That said, with your question today about the previous council meeting and something that was said that was not quite what happened here, it would have been nice that if somebody had been there. So I would like to recommend that at least one of us, I'm not sure the chairman or vice chair could go every time, but it would be nice to have a representative there in case council needed clarification of what we said, what happened.
I'll watch it, I could text. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I was going to say that when something like that happens, I'm usually watching, and I send a text to all the members on
Well, not all of them
council.
can see it. I understand Ms. Kennedy's point.
I
I don't know that
yeah,
we can
text-
commit to that every
yeah,
time.
and
I know I
I
can't.
apologize, but text is not. I don't want my council members on public media when they're trying, I don't want them on public media when they're trying to concentrate. That's not, to me, that's inappropriate public media, they need to concentrate. In fact, that was even said, one of the council members said, we've had all the Facebook or texting, we've heard that. That's inappropriate in my opinion, that's just my opinion. I don't mind going, sometimes I couldn't go. I'm not a chair or vice chair. But if we feel strongly enough about what we did, then I would think one of us could at least, there's not but one meeting a month, could at least go during that period of time.
I certainly wish I would have been there during the accessory structure discussion because I watched it and I screamed at my computer monitor
Yeah,
multiple
and I
times.
just had a senior moment because my mind went to something
I was
else.
quite upset that what we were actually trying to do did not get relayed that way, I don't believe. And the questions that council brought up, I think, were
Because each of us,
addressed during our meeting, but not relayed to them. So I actually, I understand that frustration, what you're talking about. I didn't see Tuesday night's meeting because, like I said, I'd just flown back into town and after being gone, and my wife said we were going out to dinner. But
Did they not approve the food trucks with a brick and mortar?
They
did.
did, and they didn't think that, or were concerned that they wouldn't have a lot of participation in the, and I think they wanted Well, they did. They wanted us to look at it next year and just give them an update. Are people using it? Do we want to potentially take that out
Oh.
and open it up for people to come over the
Wow,
bridge? So
wow,
there's-
wow.
Yeah, and the
I've only
re-
been trying to do this for 4 years.
Right, and the reason.
And if I'd have known that, we'd have sent it to them that way.
We spent a long time talking about the value that the owner of the brick and mortar gave to our community.
Exactly.
The investment that they put
Tax
in.
value, the pay taxes, they're here year round. You know, it had nothing to do with fear of a owner. So.
It was more of a protection.
Yeah, and it wasn't.
of those
it wasn't-
brick and mortars.
It wasn't negative, it just was something that we had worked so hard on and discussed so many ways, and it just, they had to do the same thing we did,
Yeah.
thinking we didn't do that, so that's all.
I like Commissioner Kennedy's a suggestion that someone goes, and likewise, so that they may better understand, maybe it would be appropriate to have a member of council. So when these type things come to our meetings,
Well, they
so.
can't come if it's a CUP, can they?
They
Why not? They
should.
read
They
our
probably
minutes.
shouldn't be here.
They shouldn't be here.
They probably shouldn't be here if
No.
there's a
They,
condition.
they read our minutes, it's a video.
Right.
What's the difference?
They would just
They're
need
here
to
in person, or
disclose
they're watching
that.
us on TV like people
They're not
probably are
supposed
right
to be
now.
watching.
You know, I mean, they can get the information because it's going out there, it's a public meeting.
Well, maybe we
Sure.
could first address our presence at council. So there's 6 of us, and there's a council meeting every month. What if we just get a rotating schedule where we go twice a year?
There's 7 of us, actually.
Okay. And then
There's
if you
6 here
can't,
tonight.
if you can't go, you just put an email out and see if somebody can go in your place. The idea being that one of us would be present in person.
I agree.
But we would have to agree as a group that that person speaks for all of us, right? I mean,
Well, and that's kind of difficult as well.
And it would be referred.
So we're not always going to agree on our votes.
but it's
And it would-
not your opinion, it's
No.
how we got to.
How the discussion
Right.
came
I think it's
about.
just
It
the
would
fact,
refer
just
to
for
the minutes. We would
factual,
refer to
factual
the
minutes.
Yeah, yes, the actual minutes. And just the fact, I would appreciate and would be more than willing to do that, because this is a very serious group. A
Don't
group
they
that-
get the minutes to our meeting?
Yeah, but they're minutes.
Right, it's a summary.
It's a
Well, but
summary,
that's
it's
what
not-
y'all said, you go give a minute is a
No, I'm
summary,
not,
so.
Mary, that's not what I said.
What did you say?
I said that you take your minutes and you look at the minutes and then you relate the discussion that were to the minutes. In other words, the reason that the committee decided to attach a brick and mortar was the following: because the brick and mortar pays the taxes, the brick and mortar does this, the brick and mortar does that, and that we actually said maybe down the road it should be looked at again. Exactly what the council said, they just didn't realize that's what we had said, so.
And the original intent was to clean up the itinerant merchant
Yeah, to remove
ordinance
it. Mm-hmm.
anyway, to get it its own ordinance because of the complications one brick and mortar business owner had trying to, and he might have been confused on how that ordinance even read, come to find out, but that was the original intent of the entire reason to make the change, so.
And there was lots of discussion about the ability to have different food. Well, we discussed long and hard about, and I think one of the staff said, well, that's what the committee said, that they could give different food, and they could provide, because we discussed long and hard, well, what good would a truck do if they gave the same food that the restaurant had? You know,
Or then you
right?
get into complications of what's gelato versus ice cream.
Exactly. So we had discussed that, and it might have actually helped them save a little time.
But I think I could step up to 2 times a year.
Absolutely,
and
I'd probably already go to a couple of them.
I'm here probably more than that already, so.
It's more
Yeah.
convenient to watch it at home, and I don't always watch it right away, or I watch a section of it, but I mean, I could come in person twice. I would be happy to do that, if you guys would.
I don't know, it's not like an official thing we're doing, but if we as a group want to make those decisions, I guess we can. Not that we're to be there to speak for the group, but if there's something, like you said, questions, clarifications.
And you may go and never, since
And just
they're-
sit there,
they're a member of
yeah.
the general public, unless they ask.
Yeah.
And they asked, is a representative from? the-"
I certainly wish I'd have been there for the accessory structure. I could have addressed a whole lot of
Misunderstanding.
misunderstandings and accusations. We'll leave it at that.
And one person going certainly doesn't preclude all of us from going or
Right.
speaking or
Right.
clarifying, but just have somebody designated to be there.
If it's not a CUP, I usually reach out, or sometimes they reach out to me, several council members anyway. A lot of times, and I don't know if that's just because I'm the chair or I have personal relationships with some of them, but they reach out to me, food trucks and accessory buildings both. I was talked to by several members of council, so I try to communicate with them.
I thought they couldn't do that.
If it's not a CUP.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's not
That's
quasi
separate,
judicial,
right.
it's just a text
You're
amendment.
right.
Yeah.
You're right.
We can discuss it with them, so I think that communication line should be open as possible. Good topic. Thank you. Any other?
Maybe we just communicate between ourselves, since this has to be an informal agreement. We email, hey, is anybody going to council? Just want to make
And
sure
our email
somebody-
addresses are on the spreadsheet that has
Yeah.
all of our names and everything on it, so yeah, I'm fine with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we're not doing the email to discuss
Right,
upcoming
if we could
items
just sort
or
of set
things
up
like that.
something, because a lot of people are retired, a lot of people are not. And, so maybe we could, say, okay, put the calendar out there and you sign up. Like you do church flowers, you sign up, So just say, okay, this is what's open, send the document around, sign up, and put it on your calendar and, work around it maybe.
Yeah. Very good. Any other discussion or non-agenda items, because I don't know what's the difference.
So I might be bringing up something quite unpopular, but Commissioner Kennedy brought up something that has bothered me in the past, so I'm just going to put it out there. I think it would be appropriate for the council to create a policy that suggests that you don't use electronic devices during a town meeting, and there's a number of reasons, right? First of all, it's people from the public come to speak, and if you come to a town meeting, you really care about what you're coming to speak about, and you've prepared, and you deserve to be heard and eye contact and not somebody texting somebody. So I think there's a professionalism and respect issue there. But then also some of the things that the council has to decide are quite contentious. And by the time they get up here, it's about them. It's not about people sending them information and telling them what to say, and they need to. I just don't think it's appropriate for a number of reasons. And I think I asked about it before. I don't know if I asked you, but maybe I asked Mr. Kramer and was told that the council would have to create a policy that they all agreed to and said they didn't do it. So I just like to say that I think that would be a good idea. I don't know how the rest of you feel about it.
No, I totally agree, because it has gotten to the point that it even is verbally said, even it's verbalized that somebody is on Facebook while they're at the meeting. So that's about as.
At our meeting, or?
No,
No, council.
On the
Oh,
council meeting.
oh,
I mean, it was verbalized.
But it
you
should
know.
extend to us too, I think, right? If the council was going to agree to do it, I think we should agree to do it.
Well, a lot of the texts they've been getting recently are because the people watching or trying to watch can't connect to watch.
Or
So it's-
somebody's not speaking into the
Or
microphone.
they're not speaking
you
into
can't
the
hear 'em.
microphone, that kind of
Yeah, they
thing.
should be texting the staff and not the people.
I don't have
done
any of
that
these
too.
staff members'
But
text
the whole
phone
point is,
number.
that's not for us to say, they have to decide. I personally have the amendment thing on my phone, so I try to look at that so I can read it right, but not gonna text or anything. I respect my volunteer position for them, so. That said,
Well, I do have Michael Kramer's, and I have texted him often. When I can't hear somebody speaking, or you can't hear, when the cameras aren't working, that kind of thing. So yes, Michael Kramer has gotten numerous texts
that
from
would
me
be-
during.
I hear from
council
Mary.
meetings.
That's
Huh?
staff, yeah.
I hear from
Yeah,
Mary.
Yeah, that's staff, but I'm talking about the people that are elected by the citizens.
And I'd just like to go on the record and say I'm totally okay with that. You can text me when you want to.
And usually we're pushing, Kim, our town clerk, is usually the one managing that. So if I get a text from one of you saying, hey, or council's, Steve sits over there and he's like, Ed, I can't they're not getting feed online.
Yeah.
I'm looking over at Kim, and she's over there working as hard as she can to
That's
try to.
that's totally, I think, appropriate.
Right.
It's just when a council member is distracted by someone. Yeah.
It's a distraction.
Okay, I'll keep text.
That's fine.
And I'll keep texting Michael.
That's fine, too.
And I'll put your cell phone number on Facebook.
You're
That's
looking at
nice.
Miles, right?
Maybe we need, maybe we all need Kim's
He's a new guy.
cell phone number.
There you go.
I have actually texted Kim before, but like Ed says, she's so busy doing it, she doesn't always get them.
That's why I text Michael.
Yeah, keep to
But just
Michael.
put something on the website that said if there are technical issues during the meeting, please
This
text.
is what you do.
This is what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess formalize a procedure rather than, I would not appreciate in my job, 5 people texting me when I'm trying to concentrate on something very seriously. I would not appreciate it and would not answer them and
That's a good
tell them next time, please.
Yeah, I think that
So-
should definitely be left up to the council
Yeah, I
members
think
to
so,
make
too.
that decision. I did answer or make a text message while we were in our meeting today, and I told him I was at P and Z. I couldn't talk from a phone call that was business related, so I apologize
No,
if
no,
I
I didn't
distracted
even
anybody.
notice you.
I try to
wasn't
keep it
about
quiet.
that. It wasn't about that.
But I think we'll leave that up to council to make their
That's right.
policy as far as.
They have to make their own.
No, I can recommend all I want.
I can recommend.
My only suggestion is that we suggest that they consider it. And can we make that suggestion? I know Veronica's willing to do that.
Well, it's in the minutes now, isn't it? Won't it?
Yeah,
So-
and in
It's
their
on the
minutes.
record.
It should
It's on the
be-
record.
It should be in their minutes that the Facebook was discussed.
I didn't know that part, but being appointed by council, I certainly don't want to tell them what to do. Just my
Well,
opinion.
that's not, no.
I agree the distractions
Yeah,
should be
but
kept to a
please
minimum, but I just
please
don't want.
understand, I don't think Commissioner Topping or myself is trying to.
I don't think so
tell
either.
anybody
I
what
don't
they
think
to
so,
do.
and I wasn't trying to suggest that you were.
No, I personally think that we as a group work very long and hard to get the best decisions that we can make. Not personal decisions, because you're gonna vote sometime not your heart, but what you think is best for the town. And I appreciate you volunteering to go and just be there in case we are asked, someone is asked.
Yeah, when I was on the chamber board, we always had to have somebody, we actually had a subcommittee of people that were on the government affairs, and somebody from that group had to be at the council meetings. Now, of course, that's a nonprofit chamber of commerce, it's not us, but they have a lot to do with what goes on, and having the knowledge of what's going on is important to that group, so I was at a lot of council meetings when I was on that board.
Well, I think the agendas are always published ahead of time. So if there's something going to be on the council agenda that we have addressed, then I think then one of us should be here.
Well, I just hope I hope we can, I hope somebody can be there for all of them, because I'm hoping we have input in all of them. But that said, it would be a good start.
It's a good recommendation.
Yep.
Excellent.
Anyone else? Non-agenda items? Discussion, high fives, hugs? No? Anybody want to make a motion, we adjourn?
I do.
I'll
I'll
make
make
a-
a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Always wanted to do that.
Good job.